Elara measured love by the simplest things. Not flowers or expensive dates, but the quiet ways Brennan protected her peace. Their apartment was small, paint peeling at the corners, and the ceiling fan made a tired squeak each time it turned, yet Brennan made it feel like a palace. That morning, Elara stirred oats on the old stove, while Brennan leaned against the doorway, watching her as though she was the most beautiful sight in the world. "You always make struggle taste like comfort," he said softly. Elara chuckled, wiping sweat from her upper lip. "It's not comfort, it's survival," she replied. Brennan walked closer and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "One day," he whispered into her hair, "you won't have to survive, you'll just live." That night, they sat on the floor because their couch had broken months ago, and replacing it felt like a luxury. Brennan opened his notebook, filled with route sketches and calculations. Elara lay beside him, chin on her palm, listening to his dreams as if they were bedtime stories. "Trucks," Brennan explained, tapping the paper. "Delivery routes, contracts, steady income." Elara's eyes softened. "You speak like a man who already owns it," she teased. Brennan smiled, then hesitated. "Do you believe I can do it?" he asked, suddenly small. Elara sat up and took his hand. "Brennan," she said firmly, "you're the safest place I've ever known. If anyone can build something from nothing, it's you." Brennan exhaled like he had been holding his breath for years. Elara met Brennan at a bus stop during a heavy rain that soaked the streets like a flood. She stood there, clutching her folder to her chest, angry at life, when Brennan stepped beside her and lifted his jacket over her documents without asking. "You'll ruin your jacket," Elara protested. Brennan shrugged, water dripping from his hair. "Clothes dry," he replied. "Papers don't." Something about his calmness, his simple kindness, disarmed her. They talked while the rain beat down. Brennan asked her name like it mattered. When the bus finally arrived, Elara's clothes were wet, but she felt strangely warm inside, like she had just met someone who wouldn't fail her. Their love didn't explode into fireworks. It built slowly, carefully, like a home. Brennan never tried to impress her with loud promises. He showed up, he listened, he remembered. After marriage, their routines became sacred. Sunday walks, shared prayers, quiet laughter over small meals. Some nights they could only afford one plate of rice, and Brennan would push more toward Elara. "Eat," he'd insist. Elara would scold him. "Stop acting like you are not hungry." Brennan would grin. "I'm full of love." Elara would roll her eyes, but her heart would glow. Friends envied her peace. "You're lucky," they told her. Elara always replied, "It's not luck. Brennan is simply good." She believed that goodness would last forever. Brennan's dream arrived quietly, like a thought he had carried for too long. One evening, Elara was folding laundry when Brennan sat beside her, his voice unusually careful. "What if I start something of my own?" he asked. Elara paused. She knew that tone. It meant this wasn't a casual idea. "What kind of business?" she asked gently. Brennan's face brightened. "Logistics," he said. "Deliveries, transport contracts. I know the routes. I know how the system works. I'm tired of building another man's future." Elara's chest swelled with pride, but fear followed behind it like a shadow. I love your ambition, she admitted, but we must move slowly. Brennan nodded quickly, but she could see impatience living behind his smile. Over the next weeks, pressure began to shape Brennan. He talked about co-workers who had cars and houses, men his age moving forward, people who once borrowed money from him now acting superior. Elara watched how Brennan stared too long at business adverts, how he sighed at bills as if they insulted him. One night, she found him awake at 2 a.m., scribbling numbers under torchlight. Brennan, she whispered, sleep. You're hurting yourself. Brennan rubbed his face. I just want to give you more, he replied. Elara sat beside him and covered his notebook with her hand. Don't chase money so hard that it chases you back, she warned softly. Brennan forced a laugh. That won't happen, he said, but his voice sounded unsure. Elara kissed his knuckles. Promise me you won't make desperate choices, she begged. Brennan stared at her, then nodded. I promise, he said. But fate had already started turning. Brennan did not tell Elara when he took the first loan. He convinced himself it was better to surprise her with progress than frighten her with stress. For the first time in months, he came home lighter, humming while removing his shoes. Elara noticed the shift immediately. You look happy, she said one evening as he sat for dinner. Brennan smiled. Things are moving, he replied, and kissed her forehead. Elara felt relief wash over her. She wanted to believe the dream had finally started breathing. She began to picture a better kitchen, a bigger room, even a future child without worry sitting on their shoulders like a heavy stone. But the signs slipped in quietly. Brennan began stepping outside to answer calls. When Elara asked who it was, he would say, work, too quickly. He slept less, ate less. Some nights he stared at the ceiling long after Elara drifted off. One morning she woke and found him already dressed, eyes bloodshot. Did you even sleep? She asked. Brennan avoided her gaze. A little, he replied. Elara touched his cheek. Talk to me, she pleaded. Brennan forced a smile. There's nothing to worry about, Elara. She wanted to believe him, so she did. Love can be blind when it wants peace. Yet, even while she smiled back, Elara felt a strange unease, like thunder hiding behind sunshine. The first crack came in the form of silence. Brennan returned home one evening and didn't greet Elara properly. He sat on the bed like a man carrying a dead weight. Elara approached slowly, heart already racing. Brennan, she whispered. What happened? Brennan swallowed hard. His lips trembled. The man I paid, he said, voice low. He disappeared. Elara froze. Disappeared? She repeated. Brennan nodded, eyes wet. Office empty, phones off, gone. Elara felt the room spin. She sat beside him, gripping the bedsheet tightly. How much? She asked. Brennan didn't answer immediately. That pause alone told her the truth. It was too much. To cover the loss, Brennan borrowed again, without telling her. Elara sensed it like women sense disaster. The house felt heavier. Brennan's hugs lasted longer, like he was apologizing without words. Some nights he held Elara in the dark and whispered, I'm sorry, over and over. Elara's tears soaked his shirt. "We'll survive," she insisted. But inside, fear was digging its claws deeper. One night, she confronted him. "Tell me everything," she demanded. Brennan's voice shook. "I'm trying to fix it," he said. Elara held his face. "Fixing it alone will destroy you," she warned. Brennan looked away, ashamed. That was when Elara realized the dream wasn't just cracking, it was bleeding. Elara's fear became real when she returned home early and saw two unfamiliar men outside their building. They weren't neighbors. They didn't carry groceries or look lost. They stood with the stillness of men waiting for prey. One of them looked Elara up and down slowly, like she was part of their business. Elara's stomach knotted. She forced herself to walk past them, keys shaking in her hand. When she entered the apartment, Brennan jumped as if caught. "Who are those men?" Elara asked quietly. Brennan's face flashed with panic before he controlled it. "Nobody," he replied too fast. "Maybe wrong address." Elara studied him. She knew her husband. He was lying. That night, Brennan barely ate. He sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at nothing. Elara tried to touch his shoulder, but he flinched. "Brennan," she pleaded, "you're scaring me." Brennan finally looked at her, eyes red, lips pressed tight. "Just sleep," he whispered. Elara refused. She moved closer, voice trembling. "I'm your wife. Don't lock me out." Brennan's jaw tightened. For a moment, Elara thought he would speak. Instead, he turned away, as if words would kill him. Elara lay beside him, heart pounding, staring at the ceiling. The fan squeaked above them, and outside a car engine idled too long. Elara whispered into the dark, "God, protect us." Brennan didn't answer, but Elara felt him shaking. The confession came like a collapse. Near midnight, Brennan sat up suddenly and said, "Elara, I can't keep this from you." Elara's heart slammed. She sat up too. Brennan's voice broke as he spoke loans. Failed deal, borrowed money to cover borrowed money. Threats that now felt real enough to breathe in their room. Elara listened without blinking, like she was afraid if she moved she would shatter. When Brennan finished, silence swallowed them. Then Elara's body gave up. She cried hard, raw, shaking sobs that sounded like grief already. Brennan tried to hold her, but she pushed him away for a second, not in anger, but to breathe. "Why didn't you tell me?" she gasped. Brennan wept. "I didn't want you to see me as weak." After the tears, something fierce woke up in Elara. She wiped her face and stared at Brennan with a strength that surprised even her. "Listen to me," she said, voice steady. "We will face it together. You will not die because of death." Brennan blinked, stunned. "You're not leaving me?" he whispered. Elara shook her head fiercely. "No," she replied. "I married you. I didn't marry comfort." Brennan broke completely then, sobbing into her lap like a child. Elara held him, heart aching, and whispered prayers over his head. Yet, even while she comforted him, Elara felt betrayed by life. They were not criminals. They were just two people trying to rise. Why did rising always come with teeth? Elara's sacrifice began with objects, then moved into her soul. She sold her jewelry first, even the small earrings Brennan bought her on their first anniversary. She sold appliances, clothes, anything that looked like value. Brennan watched her pack items into a bag with trembling hands. "Stop," he pleaded once. "I can fix it." Ilara turned on him, eyes blazing with tears. "You will not fix it alone," she snapped. "Do you want me to watch you disappear?" Brennan fell silent, guilt crushing him. Ilara borrowed money from friends, then from friends of friends. She swallowed pride like bitter medicine. Every day she stepped outside, she carried fear in her chest like a second heart. Brennan became a shadow of himself. He barely slept, he barely ate. Some nights Elara woke to find him sitting on the floor, head in his hands. "Talk to me," she urged softly. Brennan whispered, "I destroyed your life." Ilara sat beside him, placing his head on her shoulder. "No," she replied gently. "Death is what is destroying us, not you." Brennan laughed bitterly. "I brought it here." Elara closed her eyes, exhausted. "Then help me fight it," she said. But Brennan didn't respond the way she expected. Instead, he whispered something chilling. "If only I could remove myself from the problem." Elara felt cold. She held him tighter. "Don't ever say that again," she warned. Brennan nodded, but his eyes looked distant, like he was already halfway gone. Elara went to Brennan's family as her last hope. She dressed modestly, rehearsed respectful words, and carried her desperation like a hidden wound. Brennan's mother listened with a stiff face, then sighed dramatically. "So you couldn't control your husband?" she said. Elara blinked. "Ma'am, I came for help," she replied, voice shaking. One aunt leaned back and clicked her tongue. "This is what happens when women push men into big dreams." Ilara's throat tightened. "I didn't push him," she said. "I supported him." Another relative frowned. "Support? Or pressure? Women like you always want more." Ilara felt humiliation spread like fire. She wanted to scream, but she kept her composure. "Please," she whispered, "we are drowning." Brennan's mother stood and said coldly, "We can pray for you." Elara realized that was their version of refusal. She walked home with her head bowed, tears blurring the road. When she entered the apartment, Brennan rushed to her. "What did they say?" he asked. Elara didn't answer at first. She removed her shoes slowly, as if carrying stones. Finally she whispered, "They blame me." Brennan's face twisted with pain. "No," he said, voice breaking. "This is my fault." Elara looked at him with eyes full of hurt. "They didn't even ask if I'm okay," she murmured. Brennan reached for her hands. "Elara, I'm sorry," he said. She pulled her hands away gently, not because she hated him, but because she felt herself changing. She felt something hard growing inside her. She wasn't just a wife anymore. She was a woman learning that love could be punished. That night, Brennan finally told Elara the darkest part. He spoke slowly, like each word cut him. "They said if I don't pay," he whispered, "someone will die." Ilara's blood ran cold. She grabbed his shirt. "Then we run," she demanded. "We leave this city tonight if we must." Brennan shook his head, eyes full of defeat. "If I disappear, they will hunt you," he said. Elara screamed softly. "Then we go together." Brennan flinched as if her words hurt. "Elara," he whispered, "you don't understand how cruel they are." Elara's tears fell. "Then help me understand," she pleaded. Don't shut me out. Brennan inhaled shakily, then said the sentence that would haunt Elara for years. If I die, they will stop. Elara stared at him as if he had become a stranger. What did you just say? She whispered. Brennan's eyes were wet. It's the only way, he murmured. Elara slapped his arm, not violently but in disbelief. No, she cried. No, you're not leaving me like that. Brennan looked away, ashamed. Elara held his face with trembling hands. Promise me, she begged. Promise you won't do anything stupid. Brennan hesitated, then nodded slowly. I promise, he lied softly. Elara didn't know it was a lie. She only knew her chest felt like it was splitting open. The next evening, Brennan moved differently. Elara noticed it from the moment he walked in. He didn't greet her with his usual kiss. He washed his hands too long, like a man trying to erase guilt. Then he started arranging things, folding clothes, packing a small bag, checking his phone repeatedly. Elara stood by the doorway, watching him, heart racing. Where are you going? She asked. Brennan forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just outside, he replied. A quick meeting. I'll be back. Elara stepped closer. No more secrets, she warned softly. Brennan kissed her forehead. I promise, he said again, and the words sounded heavy, like a stone being dropped into water. Later that night, his phone rang and he answered in a low voice, turning his back to her. Elara heard only fragments. Yes, I understand. I'm coming. When he ended the call, his face looked drained. Who was that? Elara demanded. Brennan slipped his wallet into his pocket with trembling fingers. Just someone I need to see, he said. Elara grabbed his arm. Brennan, she whispered urgently, don't go. Not tonight. Please. Brennan's eyes flashed with pain. If I don't go, he murmured, it will be worse. Elara's throat tightened. Worse than what? She asked. Brennan didn't answer. He just walked out, and Elara stood frozen in the doorway, feeling as if she had just watched her life step into darkness. Elara didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, staring at it like she could force it to ring. Every minute that passed felt like a warning. She called Brennan once. No answer. Twice. Still nothing. At the third attempt, her call went straight to voicemail. Her hands began to shake. Pick up, she whispered. Please, Brennan, pick up. She tried again and again until the screen blurred through tears. The apartment was too quiet, as if even the walls were listening. Then, at exactly 1:17 a.m., her phone rang from an unknown number. Elara answered immediately. Brennan, she cried. A strange voice replied, calm and official. Ma'am, are you Elara? Elara's heart slammed. Yes, she gasped. The man's tone was careful. There has been an accident. Elara couldn't breathe. Where is my husband? She demanded, already standing up. There was a vehicle fire, the man said. We found remains. We believe it's him. Elara screamed, not like a woman crying, but like a soul tearing. She ran outside barefoot, wrapping her shawl around herself as if it could hold her together. At the scene, flashing lights cut through the night. The smell of smoke and metal crushed her. When she saw the burnt wreck, Elara collapsed onto the ground, beating her chest. "No," she cried. "You promised you'd come back." The days that followed moved like a nightmare Elara couldn't wake from. People came and went, talking loudly in her house, eating food she couldn't taste, offering sympathy she couldn't feel. Brennan's mother arrived with loud wailing, slapping her own chest until her voice cracked. Elara watched it like a stranger watching a play. She was numb, too numb to even cry properly. When the officials said the body could not be identified clearly due to the fire, Elara shook her head repeatedly. "But what if it's not him?" she whispered. The officer avoided her eyes. "It is most likely," he said. "Most likely." Those words haunted her like poison. At the burial, Elara stood beside the grave, with her hands clenched so tightly, her nails dug into her palms. The pastor spoke about heaven, destiny, and rest. Elara heard nothing. Her eyes were fixed on the coffin as if Brennan might suddenly knock from inside and say it was all a mistake. When people started throwing sand, Elara finally broke. She lunged forward, screaming. "Stop!" she sobbed. "Stop burying him!" Two women held her back as she struggled wildly. "He promised me," she cried. "He promised he would come back." Brennan's mother shouted, "My son is gone." Elara fell onto her knees, shaking violently, whispering one sentence over and over. "This is not closure. This cannot be closure." Death did not bring Elara peace. It brought suspicion. The moment the burial ended, whispers began to crawl through the neighborhood like insects. Some people claimed Brennan had been killed by creditors. Others insisted he had escaped. The most painful rumor was the one that turned toward Elara. She noticed it first in the way people stopped greeting her properly, then in the way conversations ended when she entered a room. One afternoon, she heard a neighbor mutter, "She doesn't even look like a widow." Elara froze, then slowly turned. "What does a widow look like?" she asked quietly. The woman blinked, startled, then walked away without answering. A few days later, someone visited her home pretending to console her. The woman sat on Elara's chair, eyes sharp, voice sweet. "You know people are talking," she said. Elara stared at her. "Talking about what?" The woman leaned closer. "That Brennan didn't die by accident," she whispered. "Some say you arranged it, so you wouldn't have to pay the debts." Elara's world tilted. She stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor. "Get out," she said, shaking. The woman raised her hands as if innocent. "I'm only warning you." Elara opened the door with trembling fury. "Get out of my house." When the door closed, Elara slid down the wall and sobbed. It wasn't grief anymore. It was the cruelty of being accused while drowning. The creditors came the week after the burial. They didn't knock politely. They banged on the door as if they owned it. Elara opened cautiously, and the sight of them made her stomach twist. Their faces were blank, cold, unbothered by death. One of them looked past her into the house. "Where is Brennan?" he asked. Elara's voice shook. "He's dead," she replied. The man's eyes didn't soften. Instead, he smirked. "Dead people don't clear debt," he said. Elara felt her legs weaken. "Please," she begged. "I don't have anything." Another man stepped forward. "You were his wife," he said. "That means you will pay." Elara fell to her knees without meaning to. "I buried him," she cried. "I buried my husband with my own hands. Leave me alone." One man bent down, his voice low and threatening. Listen carefully, he said. We are not interested in your tears. Sell what you have. Borrow, work, but pay. Elara shook violently. I can't, she whispered. I barely eat. The man stood and pointed at the house. Then you will lose that too. They left her shaking on the floor. That night, Elara sat in the dark, clutching Brennan's old shirt to her chest, whispering, Is this what you left me? Is this what you left me to face alone? The silence answered her brutally. Elara tried to hold on to the apartment, but death has no patience. The landlord, who once greeted her warmly, now treated her like an inconvenience. He stood at her door with his arms folded. I'm sorry, he said without sounding sorry. I cannot wait any more. Elara's eyes filled. Just give me time, she pleaded. I've lost my husband, the landlord sighed. People lose husbands every day, he replied coldly. This is business. The words cut her deeper than a slap. Elara wanted to scream, but she swallowed her humiliation like bitter water. She packed her things slowly, folding clothes with shaking hands, as if careful packing could prevent her life from falling apart completely. She moved into a small space behind a distant relative's house, a cramped room that smelled of old wood and stale air. The woman who housed her made sure Elara felt unwanted. Don't touch my food, she warned sharply, and don't bring trouble here. Elara nodded silently. At night, she lay on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, listening to rats scurrying in the corner. She cried quietly, biting her pillow so nobody would hear. In the morning, she washed her face, forced a calm expression, and stepped outside as if she wasn't dying inside. I will not break, she whispered to herself, though her body felt hollow. Her grief was no longer a wound. It was a home she lived in. Elara discovered the pregnancy in the cruelest way. She had been feeling dizzy for days, her stomach turning at smells. One morning she vomited beside the back wall of the house, gripping the bricks as if they could keep her standing. Her relative looked at her with disgust. Are you sick? The woman snapped. Elara didn't answer. She went to a small clinic with the little money she had and sat trembling as the nurse took her test. When the result came back, the nurse smiled softly. Congratulations, she said. You are pregnant. Elara stared at her, unable to speak. Pregnancy was supposed to be joy. For Elara, it felt like another mountain on a broken back. On the way home, Elara walked slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. She stopped at a roadside bench and held her belly with trembling fingers. Brennan, she whispered to the air, why did you leave me now? Her chest tightened until she couldn't breathe. Part of her wanted to reject the pregnancy, not out of hatred, but fear. She had nothing, no home, no protection. Yet when she pictured Brennan's face, she imagined this baby as the last piece of him. That night she whispered to her belly, I will keep you. Then she sobbed, quietly and deeply, because keeping the baby meant choosing suffering again. But Elara had never been a woman who abandoned love, even when love hurt her. Pregnancy did not soften Elara's hardship. It sharpened it. Hunger became louder. Fatigue became heavier. Some days she worked until her feet felt like they would split open. She cleaned houses, washed clothes, carried heavy buckets, and sold small snacks by the roadside. Every coin mattered, every breath counted. People judged her swollen belly and whispered cruel things. "Look at her," one woman muttered. "Her husband died and she's already pregnant." Elara wanted to shout, but she didn't have the strength. She simply walked away, biting her pain down like a secret. At night, she lay on her thin mattress holding her belly as the baby kicked. Sometimes the kicks felt like hope, other times they felt like reminders that she couldn't collapse. She spoke to the baby often. "You will be better than this," she whispered. "You will not beg like I begged." Yet fear lived in her throat. What if she died during childbirth? What if the baby came sick? She prayed until her lips went dry. "God," she begged, "if you won't answer my tears, answer my child." The baby kicked again, and Ilara pressed her hand there, whispering, "Hold on, we are still here." Labor came like a storm. Elara's body began to cramp at night, and by morning she was bent over in pain, sweat dripping down her face. Her relative complained instead of helping. "Don't stain my floor," the woman snapped. Elara couldn't even respond. She was taken to a small clinic where the nurse frowned at her condition. "You're weak," the nurse said. "Have you been eating?" Elara laughed bitterly through pain. "Eating?" she whispered. The contractions tore through her like fire. She cried out, gripping the bed, calling Brennan's name even though he wasn't there. "Brennan, please," she sobbed. Hours dragged. At some point, everything blurred, and Ilara felt herself slipping. When the baby finally arrived, Elara heard a cry so sharp it felt like the sound pulled her soul back into her body. The nurse placed the baby in her arms. "A boy," she said. Elara stared down at him, trembling. He was tiny, red-faced, and perfect. Tears poured down her cheeks as she kissed his forehead. "Mason," she whispered, "you are my reason." But then she felt dizziness sweep over her. Blood. Panic. The nurse shouted orders. Elara's vision dimmed. Her last thought before fading was, "Please God, don't let me die. He needs me." When she woke later, weak but alive, Elara held Mason to her chest and whispered, "I will not leave you. I will fight." Elara's rise did not begin with miracles. It began with exhaustion and stubbornness. She started small, cooking meals in borrowed pots and selling plates to workers outside office buildings. Some days she sold 10 plates, some days only 3. There were days she returned home with tears burning her eyes because nobody bought anything. Yet she kept going. She strapped Mason to her back and stood by the roadside, calling softly, "Fresh meals, warm meals," while her arms ached. One man once sneered, "Your food is too expensive." Elara swallowed her pride and replied, "Then buy what you can afford." When she got home that night, she counted her small profit with shaking fingers, then kissed Mason's cheek. "We ate today," she whispered. "That is victory." Slowly, customers began returning. A woman praised her stew. "It tastes like real home," the woman said. Elara smiled politely, but inside she glowed. Soon, people began calling ahead to reserve plates. Elara saved coins in a tin under her mattress. She learned to buy ingredients smarter, to stretch portions without lowering quality. She made mistakes too, Burnt pots, spoiled food, stolen money, but she didn't stop. One night, while Mason slept, Elara whispered, "Brennan, wherever you are, look, I'm surviving." Her eyes filled with tears, not because she missed Brennan only, but because she realized she had become the kind of woman pain could not defeat. And though the world didn't know it yet, Elara was rising. Elara's first real breakthrough came on a day she almost gave up. She stood outside an office building with her food cooler, Mason asleep on her back, and her feet swelling in her slippers. The sun was harsh, and her throat felt dry from calling out. A security man waved her away. "No selling here," he barked. Elara's face tightened. "Please," she pleaded. "Just today. I have a child." The man hesitated, then grumbled. 5 minutes. Elara nodded quickly, almost crying. That was when a woman in a neat dress stopped and sniffed the air. "What is that smell?" she asked. Elara's voice trembled. "Chicken stew," she replied. "I cooked it fresh." The woman tasted it, and her eyes widened. "This is good," she said, reaching for her phone. "Can you cater for a small event this weekend?" Elara almost dropped the spoon. "An event?" she repeated, unsure she heard right. The woman nodded. "My sister's engagement," she said. "We need food for 50 people." Elara swallowed hard, her hands shaking. "I can do it," she said quickly. Later, at home, she stared at the piece of paper with the address written on it like it was a miracle. Fear rushed in right after excitement. 50 people meant ingredients, pots, transport, timing. But Elara lifted her chin. "We are not going back," she whispered. That night she did not sleep. She planned, she calculated, she prayed. And while Mason slept peacefully, Elara promised him softly, "This is how our new life begins." The event went well. Elara arrived early, cooked with trembling focus, and served with the humility of someone who knew what hunger felt like. People praised the food loudly. Some even asked for her number. The woman who hired her hugged her at the end. "You were amazing," she said. Elara smiled, but her eyes burned with tears. When she returned home, she sat on the floor, exhausted, and laughed quietly to herself. "Brennan," she whispered into the empty room, "I did it." Yet the joy didn't last long. Success felt strange when there was nobody to share it with. She wanted to tell Brennan everything, the fear, the victory, how his son was growing. But Brennan was only a memory. Months later, Elara rented a tiny shop. Not fancy, but clean. She painted the walls herself. She hung a small menu on the door. For the first time in years, she could breathe without panic. People began calling her Madame Elara, and she smiled politely, though her heart remained guarded. Men tried to talk to her sometimes, offering compliments and interest. Elara always refused gently. One man once said, "You deserve love again." Elara replied quietly, "I deserve peace more." At night, she sat by the shop window after closing, staring at the street lights, thinking about how loneliness could still exist even when life was improving. Mason grew into a sharp-eyed boy with an innocent smile and a face that sometimes cut Elara like a knife. One afternoon, Mason ran toward her with a toy car and laughed, and Elara froze. The laugh sounded like Brennan. It was the exact same soft, boyish laugh Brennan had when he teased her. Elara turned her face quickly so Mason wouldn't see her eyes filling. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Mason asked, stepping closer. Elara forced a smile. "Nothing, sweetheart," she replied, brushing his hair. Mason stared at her. "You're sad again," he said softly, too wise for his age. Elara kissed his forehead. "No," she whispered. "I'm just thinking." As Mason got older, the resemblance became undeniable. His nose, the curve of his lips, the dimple that appeared when he smiled. Customers noticed too. "He looks like his father," people would say casually. Elara would nod, but inside she would twist. Some nights she hugged Mason too tightly while he slept, whispering, "You're all I have." But the resemblance also stirred resentment. She hated admitting. Brennan's face living on in Mason felt like a daily reminder of abandonment. One night, Elara sat by the bed and whispered, "Why did you leave me with this pain?" She looked at Mason and softened immediately. "Not you," she corrected herself tearfully. "Never you." Mason shifted in sleep, and Elara wiped her tears quietly, determined her son would never feel unwanted. Brennan's mother, Greta, returned after years like a ghost with unfinished business. She arrived at Elara's shop one afternoon, dressed neatly but with nervous eyes. Elara was shocked into silence. Greta's gaze fell on Mason, who stood behind the counter chewing candy. For a moment, Greta's lips trembled. "He's so big," she whispered, voice cracking. Elara stepped forward protectively. "Why are you here?" she asked bluntly. Greta's eyes filled instantly. "I came to see you," she said. "To see him?" Elara folded her arms. "After all these years?" she demanded. Greta looked down. "I was grieving," she whispered. Elara's laugh was bitter. "So was I," she replied. "But grief didn't stop me from raising him alone." Greta began visiting more often, bringing small gifts Mason didn't ask for. She would watch Elara closely, as if wanting to confess something but lacking courage. One evening, she said quietly, "Elara, Brennan loved you." Elara's jaw tightened. "If he loved me," she said, voice low, "he would not have left me in shame." Greta flinched as if slapped. "You don't understand," she whispered. Elara's eyes narrowed. "Then explain," she challenged. Greta opened her mouth, then shut it again. She wiped her eyes quickly and murmured, "Some truths destroy families." Elara stared at her with suspicion. The woman's guilt was loud, and Elara began to sense something unsettling. Greta knew more than she was saying, and whatever it was dangerous. The day Elara took Mason to the mall felt like a reward she had earned with blood and tears. Mason had done well at school, and Elara wanted to surprise him. "Today," she said while tying his shoes, "you can pick one toy." Mason's eyes sparkled. "One?" he repeated, excited. Elara smiled. "Yes, but only one." As they entered the mall, bright lights reflected on polished floors, and music floated gently through the air. Families moved around with bags, laughter, and ease. Elara felt a strange ache watching them. She had wanted that kind of normal life once, but she pushed the sadness away. "We are here," she reminded herself. "We made it." Mason ran toward the toy store, pulling Elara's hand. She followed, smiling, as he pointed at robots and cars. "Mommy, look!" Mason shouted. Elara laughed. "Slow down," she warned warmly. Then she paused suddenly. Her eyes caught a familiar posture in the crowd, a man standing near the store, laughing softly, his head slightly tilted in the exact way Brennan used to tilt it. Elara's breath snagged. Her heart began to pound. At first she told herself she was imagining it. Grief can shape illusions. But then the man turned slightly, and Elara's world tilted. The face wasn't a memory. It was real. It was Brennan, alive, smiling. And beside him stood a woman holding a little boy, one who looked exactly like him. Elara froze so completely that Mason had to tug her hand. "Mommy?" Mason asked. Elara couldn't respond. Her ears rang and her vision narrowed until everything except Brennan disappeared. Brennan looked healthier than he ever did in their marriage. His hair was neatly cut, his skin glowing, his clothes expensive. He laughed softly at something the woman said, then lifted the little boy and kissed his cheek. Elara's stomach churned violently. Her knees went weak. She grabbed the edge of a nearby pillar to steady herself. "No," she whispered. "No, no." The mall light seemed too bright, too cruel. Every memory of the burial slammed into her mind like a hammer. The coffin, the sand, her screaming, her begging, "He is dead." But he was right there, alive enough to laugh. Mason looked up at her face and frowned. "Mommy, you're shaking," he said. Elara blinked rapidly, forcing herself to breathe. "Stay close," she whispered, voice cracking. Mason obeyed, confused. Elara watched Brennan carefully, tracking him like prey and predator at once. He took the woman's hand casually, like a man who belonged to happiness. The little boy laughed and clung to him. Elara felt a sharp sting in her chest. "So you can be a father," she whispered bitterly, tears rising. She followed them slowly through the crowd, fear and anger mixing like fire. The woman leaned into Brennan as they walked, comfortable, loved. Elara's nails dug into her palm. "You left me to die," she whispered. "You left your son." And then she stepped forward, too far gone to turn back. Elara's voice came out broken when she finally spoke. "Brennan?" The name fell from her lips like a prayer and a curse at once. Brennan stiffened instantly. His body reacted before his mind could pretend. Slowly, too slowly, he turned around. When his eyes met Elara's, all color drained from his face. For a second, he looked like he had seen death. The woman beside him frowned. "Babe?" she asked, confused. Brennan's lips parted, but no sound came out. Elara stepped closer, trembling violently, tears sliding down without permission. "You died," she whispered. "I buried you." Her voice rose. "I cried until I could not breathe. I lost my home. I became a beggar. And you," she pointed at him, shaking. "You are here, smiling." The woman's expression shifted from confusion to suspicion. "Who is she?" she demanded. Brennan swallowed hard. "Elara," he whispered, voice shaking. Elara laughed bitterly through tears. "So you remember my name," she said, "after letting me suffer like I didn't exist?" Brennan reached out weakly. "Please," he begged. Elara slapped his hand away. The little boy stared at Elara, startled. Mason stood behind Elara, gripping her dress. "Mommy," he whispered fearfully. Brennan noticed Mason then, and his eyes widened. The resemblance hit him like a punch. "That's—" Brennan's voice broke. Elara leaned in, eyes burning. "Yes," she whispered. "That is your son." The woman stepped back, horrified. "You have a child?" she demanded, voice rising. Brennan looked trapped, and Elara knew the truth would destroy everyone standing there. Brennan didn't deny it. His shoulders sagged as if the secret was too heavy to carry anymore. "I didn't want it like this," he said hoarsely. Elara's eyes flashed. "Then what did you want?" she demanded. Brennan's voice shook. "I was drowning," he confessed. "The debts were too much. They said they would kill me. They said they would harm you." Elara's laugh was sharp, wounded. "And your solution was to fake your death?" She spat. Brennan closed his eyes. "They helped me stage it," he admitted. "They said if I disappeared and worked abroad, I could pay quietly. They promised they would leave you alone." Elara stared at him in disbelief. "And you believed them?" she whispered. "You believed people who threatened us?" The woman's face drained. "You lied to me," she said, trembling. Brennan glanced at her helplessly. "I told you my wife died," she hissed. Brennan looked ashamed. "I had to start over," he murmured. Elara stepped closer until her face was inches from his. "Start over?" she repeated, voice shaking with rage. "I was living in a cramped room behind someone's house. I was pregnant and hungry. Men threatened me. I was accused of killing you." Brennan's eyes filled with tears. "I wanted to come back when I was stable," he said weakly. Elara's voice cracked. "I was stable when you were alive," she whispered. "You destroyed me." She turned away suddenly, clutching her chest as if trying to hold her heart in place. That night, Elara could not eat. She could not breathe properly. She sat on the edge of her bed in darkness while Mason slept. Her mind replayed Brennan's smile in the mall again and again until she felt sick. Then there was a knock. When Elara opened the door, Greta stood there trembling, eyes swollen with guilt. "I know," Greta whispered before Elara could speak. Elara's face hardened instantly. "You knew," she repeated, voice dangerously calm. Greta began crying. "I found out after the burial," she confessed. "He contacted me." Elara's heart slammed. "He contacted you," she echoed. Greta nodded, sobbing. "He was alive, and he begged me not to tell you. He said it was safer." Elara's hands shook. "Safer for who?" she demanded. Greta wiped her face. "He sent money," she whispered, "to support me. Just small help." Elara stared at her like she was seeing her for the first time. "So he remembered you," Elara whispered, voice cracking. Greta sobbed harder. "I begged him to return," she insisted. "He said he would when everything was settled." Elara's eyes filled, not with grief this time, but rage. "He watched me suffer," she said slowly. "He let me carry his child alone. He let me be humiliated." Greta fell to her knees. "Forgive me," she begged. Elara stepped back, disgusted and wounded. "No," she whispered. "I will not scream. I will not beg. I will do what you should have done." Greta looked up, confused. Elara's voice became ice. "I will make him answer, and for the first time in years, Elara's pain transformed into something stronger than tears: determination. Elara's revenge was not violence, it was truth. She hired a lawyer quietly, gathering every detail: the death threats, eviction records, clinic reports, messages from creditors, witness statements. She filed cases that Brennan never expected: fraud, emotional damages, child neglect. When Brennan received the court papers, he rushed to Elara's shop like a desperate man. "Please," he begged, eyes wild, "we can settle privately." Elara stared at him without emotion. "You settled my life privately when you decided I didn't deserve honesty," she replied. Brennan's voice cracked. "I made a terrible mistake," he whispered. Elara leaned forward. "You didn't make a mistake," she said calmly. "You made a decision, and I lived inside the consequences." The scandal spread. Brennan's polished image collapsed. The woman from the mall left him when she realized she built her life on a lie. Brennan's business connections dried up. People who once admired him now avoided him. When the court ruled, Elara won compensation and legal protection for Mason. Brennan came again, crying openly, kneeling like a man finally meeting his own shame. "Elara, please," he sobbed. Elara watched him quietly, not triumphant, just tired. She stepped back and spoke softly, firmly. "You died once," she said. "I buried you. Do not resurrect in my life again." Then she closed the door, and inside, Mason hugged her waist. Elara kissed his hair and whispered, "We are free." She walked forward, alive at last.